Welcome to Tales and Nails on Loudoun Now Voice. Today, Lauren McHugh tells us the story of how being a people pleaser almost led her down a dark path.
Hello. My name's Lauren McHugh, and I'm a recovering people pleaser. Thank you. I grew up in Arlington, Virginia with my parents and my little sister in what I like to call my blissful bubble. My parents provided everything I could need and most of my wants, so I wanted to keep them happy with me because of that. Any sort of anger or displeasure pointed at me made me incredibly anxious. So I quickly learned that to keep people happy with me, I could lie. I could lie about little things like if I'd finished my homework or grades on my report card, to big things like why I was late by 2 hours for curfew or who I was with or where I was at. And that led me to lie about myself. I had two selves. The self that my parents saw. The girl that did good enough in school, was a dedicated volunteer Sunday school teacher, and after-school ballerina. There was my other self that wanted to be cool and punk and dress like the girls I saw at rock shows in DC. And I wanted to have a hot boyfriend to match. But the guys at high school didn't give me the time of day. That was until I got to college in New Jersey. Freshman year, second night, my roommate and her girlfriends had found out about a frat party on campus. And we were going. Walked in and it was just like in the movies. Dimly lit, reeked of stale beer, and loud. I ducked into the first room I came upon, was immediately handed a solo cup full of jungle juice. And introduced to Mark. Mark was blonde. He wore these cool, thick-rimmed emo glasses, and he was DJing the whole party. And he was taller than me. Mark was a self-proclaimed Southern gentleman. He'd do things like open the car door for me. And he had a rich dad, so he'd take me out on nice dates and buy me little presents. He was confident and sure of himself in a way I had never felt about myself. He dreamed of being the next Justin Timberlake. What else could an 18-year-old girl ask for in a boyfriend? I wanted to be around him all the time. I wanted to be seen with him. So I started skipping classes to spend even more time with him. I also ignored all my new friends at college, so much so that my roommate moved out second semester, and Mark practically moved in right behind her. Life was pretty great, but there were some moments that weren't. One night, while we were hanging out in my room, Mark saw on my Facebook page that a guy friend from high school had commented on my page. "Who is this?" he demanded. I shrugged it off. "Oh, just this guy from high school, Eli." He demanded I call him right then. "Tell him to never message you on Facebook again. No, never talk to him again." I was taken aback. But this was my hot boyfriend. He had chosen me. What else was I supposed to do? So I gave in to his demands. I pleased him. I called Eli and told them we were no longer friends. Summer came, I went home to Virginia, and Mark went home to Texas. I missed him, and I felt lost and alone because he'd alienated me from all my high school friends. He called me up one day and said that he could drive up and bring me back to Texas and we could spend the rest of the summer together. I jumped at the opportunity. My parents reluctantly let me go as long as I promised to return for our annual beach trip. A few days before, my mom called and wanted to know when I'd fly home. I regurgitated Mark's script, told her I didn't want to go on the beach trip, and that I didn't want to go back to college. I wanted to stay in Texas with Mark, and that's where I stayed for the next 2 years. Life was a party in Texas. Mark's dad put us up in an apartment, and we'd go on shopping sprees to Toys R Us. We'd load up on Nerf guns and video games and junk food. The days and nights ran together. But it turned out Mark's dad wasn't so rich, and he cut Mark off. So to supplement our lifestyle, I used my dwindling savings. Once that ran out, I got a job at PetSmart. I suggested Mark do the same, but that would clash with his dreams. Life began to feel suffocating with Mark. His dreams of being the next JT meant jamming with his buddies all night and smoking pot. And instead of getting real jobs, they would scheme. One night, they came up with an Ocean's 11S plan to steal a car trunk load worth of laptops. Their plan was simple. Mark's buddy would unlock the door of the Best Buy that he worked at and disable the security alarm. Mark would casually walk into the Best Buy, fill up a shopping cart full of laptops, and walk out said back door. And I would be the getaway car, foolproof. I scoffed at the idea, but Mark assured me that it's all cool. We'd be like Robin Hood. We'd be stealing from this big corporation and giving back to us. So, day of, I drop Mark off at the front door, give him a kiss, and tell him he's got this. I nervously drive around to take my position at the back of the store. As I turn the corner, a security car pulls by. My heart drops into the pit of my stomach. I cannot breathe. What am I doing? Why am I here? I can't even drive stick. This is not the life I dreamt of, that I fantasized about in my childhood bed of my hot boyfriend and our cool life together. But what life did I want? I didn't know at that moment, but I knew it wasn't this. So I called Mark and told him to abort. The next day I called my mom, and for the first time in months, and I told her I wanted to come home. I was on the next flight. I knew I wanted to be back at college. I wanted to start over. And I wish I could say, and I lived happily ever after. But Mark followed me back to college. But now I saw through his shiny, hot boyfriend veneer, and I knew I had learned that to live the life I wanted, that I dreamt of, I first needed to learn what pleased me.
Lauren McHugh, thank you very much for joining us for Tales and Ales on Loudoun Now Voice.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
So I think that a lot of times when people hear a story like this, they kind of want to know, where are they now? Like, are they okay now? Like, what's...
Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm great. Yeah, life has treated me really well since. Kind of coming out of that experience, I mean, in total, the relationship lasted about 4 years. So with the story, I kind of end around year 2. Mm-hmm. And then there are a couple more years after that I was in a relationship, falling out of a relationship with Mark. So after those 4 years, I kind of looked back at it very soon after and was like, well, that was an experience. I learned a lot about myself through it, and that's kind of what I took away from it. So
tell me about, and obviously it's a big question, but tell me about the 2 years after that. You kind of worked your way gradually out of that. You had a new perspective, it sounded like.
Yeah. So when I went back to school, because I kind of end that story like, I lived happily ever after, but that's not really how it all worked out. And I went back to school, and I was like, okay, this will be my fresh start. And Mark kind of like weaseled his way back, and he ended up following me back. I went right back to the same school in New Jersey. They had me back, which made it easy. And he just kind of was like, oh, okay, I'll come back too. And he ended up living with me on campus in my 2-person dorm room with my other roommate, which was very odd. Like Lauren now would have been like, no, that's like, that's not cool. That's not okay. And then our RA found out pretty quickly, and then he became a persona non grata on campus.
Oh, so he wasn't a student at the time?
No, he wasn't a student. So when I went back, he didn't come back, like actually back to school, but he just kind of like came back to New Jersey. And so I was like, okay, maybe that's a good hard stop. And I just kind of kept living, but he was still in the background trying to like maintain this relationship that I was like done with. And I tried like kind of breaking up with him over like months. And I was still like answering the phone to him and stuff like that. And eventually my parents were like, okay, I'm sure they were like in the background like, how do we get our daughter out of this? And they gave me an opportunity to go on a volunteer trip to Australia for 6 weeks that summer that I had gotten back to school. So this was like 2010. And I went to Australia, and I actually met a boy there, and I had an amazing excursion in Australia for 6 weeks. And then I remember calling Mark vividly and being like, I am done. And he was like, well, I'm just in, because he had gone back to Texas that summer. He's like, I'm going to be back in New Jersey. I was like, no. I was like, I'm blocking your number. I'm done. So whatever happened in Australia was just like this awakening, this final like knock in the head to be like, what, why are you still answering the phone to him? Why are you still entertaining this or whatever? So yeah, that was like the hard stop.
Yeah. Well, as a sometime people pleaser myself, that's kind of the story of a people pleaser breaking up with someone is I had to go to the other side of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, run as far away as possible. And then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to dwell on that too much, but so do you know what's come of him these days? Have you ever found out what happened to him after that?
Well, I like created space, and then I had a moment, I don't remember when exactly, but it a few times he's popped up in my head, and I'd be like, I wonder where Mark is now. And I've tried doing like the reverse number search for like an old number. And he actually called me out of the blue.
Oh dear.
Years ago. And it was just like a random number I didn't recognize. And not that like I had deleted his numbers at that point. So it was just like a Texas area code. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And I picked up, and he was like, I don't remember what we talked about. But I was like, I heard his voice, and I like froze. And I was like, what could you possibly get from me? And it was a short conversation because I was just like, I don't want to entertain this at all. But yeah, I've looked him up on social media. I can't find him. Can't find him on YouTube. So he didn't become that famous producer or anything like that, as far as I can tell. But yeah, I have no idea where he is.
That's kind of funny. Like sometimes when you go back to a place that you were as a kid, or like you hear from someone you haven't talked to since you were a lot younger, it kind of takes you back, and all of a sudden you're like a teenager again.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, it really like kind of knocks you back into like almost a different self.
One thing that stood out to me about the story was you sort of drew a connection between having a pretty comfortable life, you know, as a young person, and becoming like a people pleaser who kind of got, I think it's probably fair to say, manipulated into almost robbing a Best Buy. You know?
Yeah.
That's interesting that you think that you kind of draw that connection between, yeah, I had a really good life, and that kind of led me down this dark path in some ways, or open that up.
Yeah. I call my childhood my little bubble that my parents set up this beautiful life for me, and provided everything I could want. And I like hit college, and I had seen my friends kind of rebel in high school, and I felt like I'd never had that moment outside of that bubble to kind of like rebel against the self that I feel like my parents wanted, or that my parents envisioned for me. So that kind of felt like my rebellion. I always have a hard time thinking about, or like trying to draw those connections with childhood, where I look at like say my husband's childhood or friends' childhoods, where they're like, oh, I get grounded all the time, or like my parents were alcoholics, or like there was like, or my parents got divorced. There was all this strife, and I had this nice little bubble, and I was like, well, what could be wrong with my life? Everything was nice. But now, as an adult, I've realized that if everything isn't nice, that almost creates this weird unease, or this anxiety, or this angst, that it's like when something's suddenly not nice, you have to like, you're like, oh no, it's gotta, like, you gotta pull it back in immediately. Mm-hmm. That there's like, I feel like I don't or I've struggled to deal with other people's kind of more extreme emotions. Mm-hmm. When I grew up and everything was just like nice. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, there's kind of a component, I think, of when you're in a pretty good situation, but there's also a lot of sort of, I mean, you were doing a lot. You were like, you were teaching Sunday school, you were a ballerina and everything else.
Yeah.
When you have these kind of high expectations on you, I feel like it does kind of, you eventually find the point in your life where you sort of figure out who you are, right? And sort of do the things you want to do.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I mean, sometimes that's kind of an adventure, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And like I really liked the things that I was doing in the moment. And that it's kind of over the last couple years of, and I feel like telling this story and putting this story together led me into kind of a deeper exploration of myself now. And it's been tough because I'm like, oh, have I people pleased myself into the life I have now? Mm. Do I really like and enjoy the life I have now? Do I like the career that I'm in? Do I like the marriage that I'm in, and all of that? Do I like the person that I put off to the rest of the world? And telling the story really set off that chain of events to kind of like dig into that, do a little bit of therapy. And I had like a tough, like, kind of 6 months. Because when did I tell this story? Beginning of 2024, I think, like January-ish. And then by the fall, I was like kind of in this like turmoil. And I put my husband through a lot. And he was such a trooper. Because he was like, I don't know what's going on with her, but I'm just gonna like be there for her. And he's like, maybe it'll all settle out. And it's starting to settle out, and I feel good about who I am and what I want out of life. And thankfully it is where I live. It is the career that I'm in. I'm happy with the marriage that I'm in. I'm happy with the career that I'm in. I'm really happy to be living back here in the DC area. I think that's been a big piece, is like, I like this place and the things that it affords. myself and other people. So, yeah.
Yeah, just for the people who don't know you, like, and where you wound up, like, you're doing pretty cool stuff now. You just moved back to Old Town Alexandria, I think.
Yeah.
Your husband, I gather, is a little bit of a step up from some of the guys you've dated before.
Yeah.
And you're doing environmental consulting, I think you said?
Yeah. So I ended up getting a degree in chemistry from the college I went back to, Rider University. Met my husband probably like maybe a year after like kind of things finally ended with Mark. And he was in the Army at the time, and he was going off on a deployment like 6 months after we met. And I was like, cool, we'll get to know each other, and then if it works out, it works out. And I so vividly, I mean, maybe this would be the next story I tell. I so vividly remember me preparing for my first date with, so my husband's name is Mike, preparing for that date. And I was like, okay, you're not going to pretend to like the bands that he likes if you don't know them. Because that was the stupid thing. I'd be like, oh yeah, I love those guys. Like totally. Because I wanted to seem cool. But I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell him exactly what I like, and I'm going to be myself, like unapologetically Lauren. And it worked out. We've been together for 14 years and married for 11.
Cool, congratulations.
Thanks.
On stage, there's like 8 minutes of story. But there's a lot of work that goes into getting ready to tell a story,
Oh, yeah.
especially one that's so personal.
Yeah.
A big one. Like, tell me a little bit about, I guess the first question is, what made you decide to tell the story in front of an audience anyway?
Sure. So my buddy, Sam Hedenberg, is part of the Tales and Nails group. And we were hanging out at his house, him and his wife and me and my husband, and we're all getting to know each other. And at some point, enough beers were had, and I was telling this story. And Sam was just like mouth agape, and he was like, you have to tell this story to people. Like, people would love to hear this. And I'm like, and it's such a long, rambling story when I usually tell it to people. And he's like, I'll help you cut it down, and we'll figure out like a timeline that kind of like arcs so it makes sense. I was like, okay, cool. So Sam helped me a lot for preparing and like kind of writing out the story and rehearsing it and all of that and putting it together in a digestible format for 8 to 10 minutes. Because in like the true timeline of my life and my experience with Mark, the potential Best Buy heist happened actually back in New Jersey. But he was like, if we put it like, it still happened to you, but it would like kind of finish off the arc of the story a little nicer if we stick it.
This was after you came back to college or before you left?
Yes. So after I came back to college. So I did have this epiphany one night in Texas where I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. And I called my mom, and my parents are the most amazing human beings and loving parents. And they're like, all right, you want to fly home tomorrow? Like, we'll get you a flight. Like, and I was like, okay, well, let me process this a little bit more.
Yeah.
But maybe like a week later, I was
Yeah.
home. And and that was like October, November-ish. And then I was like, I want to go back to school. And I was able to go back that spring semester. But then Mark followed me back to New Jersey, and kind of in the last like 2 years of our relationship, he had a buddy, a former roommate whose little brother worked at Best Buy. So that was our in.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. And that was like at the beginning of the end where I was like, what? Like, we can't keep entertaining this.
Yeah, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Also, the heist would have never worked. You guys would have for sure.
No, absolutely not. Oh my God. Because one, like, even if we had like gotten out of there with them. And like, what do you do with them after? They have serial numbers and stuff, and like all of these things. Like none of that would have worked at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have like. I was thinking on the drive out here. I was like thinking about that like chunk of time, and there's certain moments that aren't of significance really that I remember vividly. But then there are others that I feel like I should remember that I don't know if like my brain, my subconscious is protecting me, but I don't remember a lot of those fears.
Yeah.
So,
that's one of the interesting parts about doing a Tales and Owls story about your own life, where you have to fit it into a sort of a pat, just by the nature of storytelling, you have to fit it into sort of a pat narrative. But like you say, like, well, this had a tale and I'm still kind of living it today. And you kind of have to just decide, like, here's what goes in and here's where I draw the line of where this story ends. It's kind of a tough choice to make, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. And Sam really helped me craft that.
Cool.
He does that a lot.
So that was quite a process then, just even, that was quite a process, just telling that story and then dealing with having told that story.
Yes. Yeah. I actually, because I was telling my parents that like, oh, I'm doing this thing. I was really excited to do it, and because I feel like I'm a mix of introvert and extrovert, but growing up on the stage, like I definitely have that streak of wanting to perform. So I was like excited to like perform in front of people. So I was telling my parents that I'm doing this thing, and I was telling them what story that I was going to tell. And my mom was like, do you want us there? And I told them no. And they were very respectful of that. And even like when the YouTube video came out and it posted and I shared it on my Instagram, because like I wanted other friends to see it and stuff. My mom called me and she's like, I saw your post. I'm not going to watch it out of respect for what you asked of us, which has been amazing. Like, again, I have the most amazing parents.
Were there friends of yours who found out about this story from Tales and Owls, or did you talk to your parents about it afterwards? Like, what was the reaction of people from hearing this?
There are definitely some people that I'm not as close with. Like I coach at the weightlifting gym that I train out of now. So there were a lot of people that follow me on Instagram from that part of my life that hadn't heard this story before and watched it and were like, oh my God, that's a crazy experience. I can't believe you lived through that. Like, and like, kudos to you for telling that story. So there was those people in my life. Like, I relived pieces of the story, like talking to my parents about that. I was telling it. I just didn't want them to know the Best Buy part.
So did they not know about that?
No, they don't know about that part. So that's the big reason I didn't want them to come see the story, because I was like, the climax of this is like something they don't know about, something I don't want them to know about me. Or me, like, screw it. Like, maybe.
So have they still not seen the story?
As far as I know, they haven't watched it.
All right, well, make sure you tell them not to watch this either, I guess.
Or I was thinking about it too. I was like, maybe they can finally see it now. I don't know. And a reason why I got excited to tell a second story and why I want to tell more stories is the reaction of people that came up to me afterwards. There were a couple women that came up to me after and they were like, thank you so much for telling your story. They're like, I've come to these things before and this is the first one that I connected with. I had this experience and it was really tough to deal with. So hearing that you went through something similar and how you got through it, or didn't get through it or whatever, was helpful for me, or I enjoyed hearing it. So that was kind of the best part for me.
I have noticed that for people who tell personal stories at Tales and Owls, this happens a lot where people come up and say that you would have never suspected, say, yeah, that sounds really familiar. I lived that too. Like it's sort of a validating thing that everyone has been through.
Yeah.
You feel alone in these things, and it turns out that no, actually, there's 5 other people just in this room that had this experience. So.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's kind of the purpose of Tales and Eels is to, and what we do telling stories to each other in our lives is to draw connection between familiar experiences and to get closer. And again, part of why I wanted to do it. Because to do something in person, in front of people, can be terrifying and stressful, because it was for me the first one. I watched the video back and I'm like, oh my God, my face is so red. But then I settle as I get going. But so many people will sit in front of their phone and tell a story and post it on their Instagram or TikTok or whatever. But to prepare something and say it in front of other humans is a totally different experience.
It is. It's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah. I mean, I've thought about, so like talking about that was the story I told is kind of the first 2 years. And I've thought about like, oh, should I tell the second 2 years, or like tell another piece of that experience.
Because you did tell another story at Tales and Nails.
I did, yeah. About how I got into Olympic weightlifting and how that experience has affected my life. And Olympic weightlifting has really affected me as a person, and I feel like I have become myself through the sport. That it's something I found, it's something I've dedicated a lot of time to. I actually just about a month and a half ago went to test at the most recent USA weightlifting national competition to become a national referee. And I passed. So I compete, I train, I coach, and now I'm official referee for the sport as well. So like,
congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
Pretty cool.
So that's something I've thrown my whole heart and self into, and I feel like it's like I'm not pleasing anybody but myself.
How long do you think it'll be before we might get another story on stage?
I don't know. Maybe I'll find something and I'll audition for the next one. I've been itching to it's a really fun process. And it's been about a year, I think, since I told my weightlifting story. And life has kind of settled down a little bit. So maybe I'll tell a story.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Well, Lauren McHugh, thank you so much for joining us to talk about your story from Tales and
Of
Nails.
course. Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.